Hello and welcome to Freedom Keepers Senior Edition. This is our second episode today. We call it The Great Divide and Fear. So, are you ready to stand strong for liberty and be brave along with us in speaking out? Please join me, Irene, and my co host, Beverly, to unite and fight for freedom. So, Beverly, what is the Great Divide and how did we get here? What are your thoughts, please?
Thank you, Irene, and welcome to those who are joining us today. Well, we're more divided today regarding our politics more than any time since the Civil War. It took time to get here, but in the last 20 to 30 years, it escalated probably because of social media.
Probably, yeah. By the way, Beverly, an interesting factoid. Keep in mind that the Democratic Party was founded initially in 1792 against Jefferson and several aristocratic policies. They officially changed to the Democratic Party in 1828. The Republican Party was founded in 1854 by Abraham Lincoln based on abolitionist policies leading up to the Civil War. And that's where we have stood for a very, very long time.
Well, Irene, you have to really go back to Franklin Delano Roosevelt's time, who was a Democrat from 1933 to 1945. Can you believe he was elected 4 times as president? And also about his New Deal policies, where he introduced many programs expanding the government's role in the economy and society. His opponents criticized him for being a socialist at that time. He introduced Social Security, labor rights, federal jobs programs, regulations, and reforms in banking. Some of the programs are still in place today, like Social Security. And what would we seniors do without it?
Amen.
Yeah, it's true. It's been a lifesaver for many. FDR considered himself a pragmatist, not a socialist, but he leaned very much towards the left. Then there was the start of the Vietnam War. This was supposed to be the war that combated communism. Protests were rampant against this war and against President Johnson. He wasn't well liked, and many blamed him for escalating the war. Many lives were needlessly sacrificed, not to mention the damaging effect Agent Orange had on our troops. A great book written by Kristen Hanna about the Vietnam War called The Women offers a compelling view of nurses fighting to save the lives of young men in a losing war waged by politicians.
And yes, it is a great book, Beverly. I did read it at your recommendation. And I have to add here that although I was not registered with any party at the time when I was young, and most of my friends at that time in school were not, I was a huge Vietnam War protester while in college, also a hippie. I'd hop on a bus in upstate New York, ride down to Washington, D.C. to protest. However, we never had violent protests the way they do today. We had the numbers, and we had a large numbers, but not the violence, which I think eventually made a difference to Congress, that is our numbers, who ultimately cut the funds for that war.
Well, Irene, many young men and women protested. You weren't alone. Over the last 50 years or so, political divide between the Democrats and Republicans became more evident, with moderate Dems leaning toward the left, becoming more liberal in their thinking, and wanting more government control. The Republicans remained conservative in their approach, and these were led by wealthy politicians wanting to maintain the status quo. Today, political leaders like AOC, Jasmine Crockett, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who recently retired from what I understand, and Rand Paul all contribute to polarization by using highly emotional speeches along with leveraging social media platforms. They get on their soapboxes and often mislead the public with their false dichotomies and polarization.
Absolutely. They do it all the time. Let me add a few items for thought here. I love AI or artificial intelligence. You can ask it anything, and it's truly amazing. So when I was researching, I found AI to sum up how did we get here or the Great Divide quite nicely. There are 4 items that they underscored. Ideological sorting, that is liberals versus conservatives, goes way back in history, which we just discussed with Beverly. So what else contributes? Rise of partisan cable news channels. Decline of local news channels, seeing fewer and fewer of these. And the proliferation of social media platforms. And research shows Approximately 53% of seniors, all of us, are using social media.
How very true. Yes, Irene, that's really true. What happened to reporting the news like in Walter Cronkite's day and the Huntley Brinkley report? I love the banter between these two, but only the facts were told, not their personal commentary. The media bias only increases political polarization and incivility by eroding our trust in media outlets. Let the American people interpret the facts and keep their opinions to themselves. Let the people decide.
Yes, and they should. And just a bit about social media. They use a lot of algorithms, which are built into the social media platforms. So, what is an algorithm? A lot of us don't know. It's really important. It's sort of like a step by step recipe in a computer program designed to solve a problem or computation to achieve a decided outcome, meaning it's planned. And sometimes these outcomes have widespread and diverse outcomes, such as bringing about significant efficiencies or serious concerns about bias, privacy, and accountability. Algorithms limit exposure to diverse information. They can contribute to misperceptions about the other side. And more importantly, they can contribute to misperceptions about the other side and can fuel animosity.
Also, Irene, we can't blame this great divide on the 2016 election and Donald Trump because polarization was happening way before that. The absolute worst that I've seen is socially elite Hollywood who think that they have the answers to all of our problems. These millionaire activists push their socialist ideology with the expectation that we're going to listen to someone who can't even think or see beyond the script that is handed to them. Thankfully, most Americans fall to the center. Why do you think this is true, Irene?
Yes, I wish the actors would just stay with acting. Something I learned in my research that I didn't know before, which I think is important to emphasize here. There was something called the repeal of the Fairness Doctrine in 1987. In effect, Federal Communications Commission, our Federal Regulation Commission, from 1949 to 1987, they had a policy providing adequate coverage of controversial issues. Ensured coverage was balanced, presenting contrasting viewpoints, and this was the law. The public deserved this.
Sure.
Even the Supreme Court upheld it in 1969. That is, rights of viewers, such as you and I, and listeners, was most important, not the rights of the broadcasters. So we had this going on for quite some time. However, in 1987, the FCC voted to abolish it, and Congress failed to uphold it, so it was repealed. Ergo, the outcome is our extremely biased news networks. They have no regulations that they need to report to. I would also add our division is very much elite-driven. Elected officials often are more polarized than the public, and they're influenced by campaign financing. Structures of closed primaries often favor extreme candidates. Political leaders who are extreme naturally receive the most attention by media, so they are incentivized to take a polarized stance rather than compromise. It's an us versus them mentality, amplified by political rhetoric and media coverage that demonizes opposition, which is working, right? A political science professor at Syracuse University, Joanna Dunaway, she did a study on this after studying this great divide for many, many years. And she talked about the misperception problem that most people tend to assume ordinary partisans hold the same views as their party's leaders. Remember those extreme leaders that get the most attention because they are extreme?
That's true.
Apparently, that's not the case. She says that most Americans fall close to the center. I thought that was good news.
No, it is.
However, they tend to think that opposing party is extreme based on their party's leaders. So this all creates perception of greater policy differences in public more than it really is. And that's something we have to keep in mind. So media effects exist, but they don't work the way people often assume, with media doing all the persuading. And patterns of information we end up being exposed to still exacerbate divisions. Professor Dunaway And here's the good news. She thinks this will be resolved by going back to local and more local news channels, more options for local news, which has always been less polarized. Many foundations and corporations are putting in money and efforts into this initiative right now, but there are also opposing forces that are trying to do away with local TV and radio stations. For example, the doing away with AM radio, that's a big thing right now.
How very true, Irene. Also, in the Great Divide, since so many people are having a difficult time in defining a woman, which drives me crazy, by the way, I want to add my definition of what I know a woman to be. I am a biological woman created by Almighty God at birth and defined by my XX chromosomes, which is currently not possible to change neither by science nor medicine. And believe me, they've tried. I was born with a uterus, a vagina, fallopian tubes, ovaries, breasts, and the ability to ovulate, be inseminated, menstruate, and go through menopause. Can carry a child for 9 months, have my bony pelvis stretch wide open so that a child can pass through the birth canal. And if you don't think this is a miracle, then nothing is. I can use both sides of my brain. I multitask, can work a job, take care of my house, my children, my husband, and still enjoy sex. That is, if my husband were still alive. And that's just the beginning. I am woman, and I love being one. Ladies, be proud.
Thank you, Beverly. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it is one of the biggest results or outcomes of this great divide, which exists now in our country today, is fear. Fear is a result, and it affects the mindset of seniors today. So can we talk a little bit more on this, about the subject of fear?
Sure. Fear and anxiety can influence the seniors to not participate in political discussions. And that's what you and I are trying to reverse with this podcast, are we not?
Yeah.
Seniors are also fearful of political issues. They don't want to get involved. They think they can't make a difference. It's so sad. We need to become more empowered to stand up without fear for love of God and for our country. You know, your fear affects your cognitive brain. One way we can prevent some forms of dementia is to keep exercising our brains, playing cards, social luncheons. That's not really going to help those neurons in our brain. Neurons lose communication and die because of a toxic buildup of plaque when they're not in use. We can help stimulate our brains with mental challenges and exercises. Get involved. Reach out to our grandchildren. Be a mentor to them. Help them to see that God gave them a brain and they need to use it, rather than be led by someone else's ideology. As Rene Descartes, known as the father of modern day philosophy, said, I think, therefore I am. Then there's a loss of independence. You know, they feel, well, you know, it's like, I'm not me. I don't know how to talk. Financial concern, fear of running out of money, fear of judgment. And that's the worst. Also, the biggest fear in seniors is failure. I used to tell my children that you're going to fail in life, but you're not a failure until you stop trying.
That's so true. People, seniors they need to try to get off the golf course more. Fear really blew up during the COVID. Right. Fear really blew up during the COVID pandemic. Fear of being canceled or worse, being fired from your job. We were inundated, and I mean inundated, with mandates. There were mandates for the vaccines, for masks, standing 6 feet apart. That was my favorite. Kids not going to school. Several businesses closed, indoctrinated with DEI, wokeism, and other nonsense. Fear is the best way to control a population, I feel. And I feel this was a big test, and frankly, it succeeded. We found out later, or most of us did, that the mandates were not viable. Vaccines were not delivering as promised. Masks did nothing, etc. In short, we were duped. But the worst part about it was our children suffered the most by not being allowed to attend school, and they fell back, getting even further behind than they already were, which was very sad.
Yes.
And some of this fear has held over to the current day. We're afraid to speak our minds and our opinions. Why? We're afraid the neighbors won't talk to you anymore. Afraid your family members won't associate with you anymore. Well, guess what? It's their loss, not yours. I say so be it. Friends like that you don't need, or if family members want to be that obtuse, let them. Again, their loss, not yours. You have life experience and wisdom from that experience. Your voice matters and counts. Don't let your friends and family dictate the way you feel. Express your opinion, backing it up with facts, and always respectfully. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, and the difference of opinion is one of the things that makes this country great, and it's based upon. Both Beverly and I have personal recent experiences how we've been cut off or ostracized by friends and family, as I'm sure many of you have had also. So I'll start with my two recent experiences. I'll give you the short version.
Oh, that's good.
I knew you'd appreciate that. A family member, I was talking about doing this podcast, just giving them a little information about it. And they're Democrats, and I know that, but in the very middle of my little spiel, we're Democrats. And then one of them left the room. So they didn't want to talk to me. And later on, I sent them a logo of the podcast, and they did not respond. So I said, well, did you get it? Yes. They didn't want to, they didn't want to do anything. So I felt they were really, and again, in an email, my family member said, I will not discuss politics with you. I said, okay, don't, I couldn't believe it. Then a friend of mine of 35 plus years saw her about 3 or 4 months ago, and we had a lovely day outside in the garden, barbecuing, and had a good time. And our husbands were close. The four of us were very close. And all of a sudden she says something, well, Trump is a Hitler. And I said, oh, please don't say that because, I'm a Trump supporter. Anyways, so then she didn't call me for 3 months. I finally called her on it and said, well, is that because no, I'm not going to aggravate myself or you by discussing politics. So folks, people, they don't want to discuss politics. I personally feel it's because they have nothing to say. They have no opinions. They have no facts to back it up. Number one. Number two, do they realize how hurtful that is to you to do that to people? And it's also so disrespectful, meaning you don't have the brains to figure out what their opinions could be. Anyways, it's a very horrible, hurtful experience. And the fact that they don't want to discuss politics with you, I think is wrong, just basically wrong. And I think they're cowards for doing it. Beverly, why don't we go on to yours?
Well, Irene, those stories were really, really unbelievable. It's like it's very, very difficult for me right now to even think about, how are we going to change all of these things? But my experience, I would go back to nursing 40 years ago, 45 years ago. I had a very good friend for 35, 40 years that I met nursing, and she became visibly upset when she learned that I would be voting for Trump. Um, I really don't. I didn't understand what she was talking about, and she kept calling him a Nazi, a fascist. I tried to explain to her that he wasn't a fascist or a Nazi, and that we had a system of checks and balances. But she didn't listen. She wasn't listening. I have to just go a little further. She came from a country that was experimenting with socialism, and I believe this is one of the reasons why she migrated to America. However, that system failed and led to economic stagnation and a financial crisis in the 1990s. Unfortunately, she stopped talking to me rather than listening to what I had to say. I found that she wasn't the only one who disagreed with my political persuasions. Let me clarify something. I'm an independent who votes for the person I have researched that will do the best for this country. It could be a Republican or Democrat. If you put America first, along with her people, then you have my vote. We have to be able to talk to each other, to agree to disagree. That's what America used to be like, but it changed dramatically in the past 25 years. Let's get it back. I'm an independent voter who supports candidates I believe are the best for this country based on my research.
And Beverly, I really agree with that. Both of us are pretty much independents. And again, I vote for policies. I do not vote for I don't vote for personalities. And I think that's one of the problems a lot of people have. They've just been so used to voting for one party or another for 30 years. They don't bother to research the policies. They go for the personalities, and that's not what it's all about. So something that no one ever talks about, which I wanted to introduce here, they keep calling Trump and Republicans Nazis and Trump Hitler. I think these people are either uneducated about Hitler and history or just plain stupid. Whereas those Democrats spouting forth this rhetoric and hate speech are just like the Nazis themselves, because Nazis used the Jews as a scapegoat for all their economic problems and problems in the country. Democrats are using Trump now for more than 10 years as their scapegoat for all their perceived problems or issues that they just can't deal with. So they're behaving, behaving just like the Nazis, and they're extremely anti-American. Even, for example, gay and trans people who support and protest for Hamas, Palestine, etc., when they don't even know that those cultures will just kill them. It's insane. They can't even be bothered to find out. It's sort of ludicrous. And that's a real shame, because this Democrat Party is now so far to the extreme left that most of the moderate Dems are afraid of them and just let them continue to spew forth their illogical hatred and violence. And most Americans listening sense that there's a big streak of anti-Americanism there as well. This is not healthy for this country. Seems like they're digging their own grave. If the moderate Dems would speak up, and they do exist, there are quite a few of you out there, we would be able to get back this Democratic Party. They can't be afraid of the extremists, because America needs the Democratic Party. A two-party system is most healthy for our democracy. So speak out to your family, friends, and neighbors. Don't be afraid to talk. It will only hurt you and fester inside. And those that won't talk to you about their opinion, again, they can't defend their opinions, so they just won't discuss politics with you. That's cowardice. So when you stop talking, especially with those you disagree with, you become weaker. Disagreement should not be canceled. It should be confronted. Speak the truth. Truth requires courage. Beverly, so what else can seniors do today to try and close this great divide or gap that we have in this country?
Well, we can start talking about politics without fighting. Maintain relationships. Talking about politics is important. It promotes a healthy, functioning democracy. Be humble, be open to the opposite viewpoint. The goal here is to learn and share, not to debate. Avoid debates on social media.
Yes, Beverly, social media is a totally separate topic, which we'll be addressing in the near future in an episode all to itself.
Right. And also be an active listener. Listen by being tuned in to what the other person is saying. Ask open-ended questions. Use personal stories like we did, Irene. Mm-hmm. How do opposite issues affect you? And acknowledge feelings. Watch body language, keep eye-to-eye contact, and agree to disagree, which is all perfectly normal.
So what can all of us seniors do to bring the great divide in politics closer together? Let's try to diminish the gap. We can organize community events that encourage discussion about political issues among seniors. Teach other seniors how to use technology to be able to register and vote online. Encourage seniors to engage their peers in conversation about the importance of voting. Encourage seniors to speak up and to be heard, and never, ever to be afraid.
That's very, very true. Well, folks, thank you for listening today. Stay tuned for our next episode, which is going to be on immigration, and that's certainly a hot topic. Remember to like, subscribe, and share our podcast and listen with new episodes every other Sunday. Let us know what you, as seniors, want to be talking about.
And coming soon, we'll also be having an e-newsletter for anyone who is interested, and you can sign up for. Help support our message to help bring this country back to the people, along with justice and equality for all of you, regardless of which party you belong to, because remember, you belong to America first. So thank you for listening to Freedom Keepers Senior Edition. Thank you, Beverly. Talk to you next time.
Thank you.